sorry, I want to come in the front door. Hey, if I happen to be coming from the other direction and want to go in the back door, now I have the choice. Nobody has forced me to go in the back door.
Hello, and welcome to a special edition of DNet, the Disability Network. I'm Susan Pettit.
And I'm Joe Coughlin. On today's show, we're featuring highlights from the past season. Building codes have been getting stricter in recent years, and people who create bylaws at the provincial and municipal levels are taking the needs of people with disabilities into account. But those rules aren't always abided by or very well enforced. If you're disabled, one way of making sure the system works is to make your presence felt at City Hall. Nevan Fitzpatrick is a specially appointed bylaw enforcement officer with the City of Brampton in Ontario. He deals with the area of access for people with disabilities. He's also a member of the Brampton Action Group. I spoke with Fitzpatrick at his home base, Brampton's new City Hall, where there is a ramp leading to the front door, although it wasn't in the original plans for the building.
The designer, the architect of the building, he did not want a ramp at the front of the building to spoil the aesthetic value of the building.
After learning that the front door wouldn't be accessible, Fitzpatrick brought his concerns to the council chambers, and City Council decided to change the design.
I want to come in the front door. I'm just like anybody else. Hey, if I happen to be coming from the other direction and want to go in the back door, now I have the choice. Nobody has forced me to go in the back door. I'm allowed to come in whatever door I want to.
It's an example of how Fitzpatrick, who has another job and works at City Hall as a volunteer, is making his city accessible for people with disabilities. One of his responsibilities is making sure that people know about and comply with any new bylaws.
The main push recently has been a change in the bylaws, enlarging the parking spaces for the disabled and new signage.
As a bylaw enforcement officer, he has the power to compile a list of businesses that haven't complied and make sure they do.
They will be notified through the bylaws department by mail and possibly a summons to court where they can be fined upwards to $2,000 and still have to do the work.
Aside from enforcing bylaws, Fitzpatrick feels he has a lot of educating to do. Many buildings in Brampton are old, built before bylaws were in place requiring accessibility features. They are covered by a grandfather clause, which states that they're exempt from making renovations. Fitzpatrick doesn't think that's fair.
By being exempt, they're saying they don't have to provide service to me. There used to be a computer store here that I wanted to go into. Could never get inside. Was able to sit out there and look through the window. There's a lovely bakery around the corner. Neither one of us will ever get in there. I suppose if we tapped on the glass, they'd come out and ask us what we want. But it's raining today. Do you want to sit out there? A couple $100 would probably make that thing very accessible.
A couple of $100. Fitzpatrick says shop owners shouldn't just be looking at the expense side of the financial equation. He's contacted businesses in the city and pointed out that if they're not accessible, they're losing customers.
And in some cases, businesses, I've said, look, I got money to spend. Get me in here so I can spend it. You need my business. I need your product.
Some of the businesses that have been listening to Fitzpatrick are shopping malls, like Brampton City Centre and Shoppers World. Shoppers World was built before there were strict building codes, so they weren't obliged to make any renovations.
I showed the manager where we needed access, ramps, curb cutouts, and he fully agreed. And it's in the budget to be done, but because of the recession, it's been deferred till next summer. But in the meantime, immediately after we finished talking, he had instructed his construction staff, maintenance staff, to put in cold patch ramps so that at least we still can get in and out.
And the recession is a consideration for most businesses. But Fitzpatrick is confident that things can be worked out, even when renovations aren't required by law.
Perhaps the answer would be to say to the people that are covered under this grandfather clause, okay, set down a plan that's financially feasible for you. Let's look at it, review it over a period of the next 5 years or 2 years or whatever. to make this building totally accessible. Something that fits into their pocketbook without hurting the owner of the building, but allows the disabled to start using that facility.
You've been relatively successful convincing developers and people who own businesses to make their facilities accessible to people who have disabilities. Is there any advice that you could give somebody in some other town that is trying to do the same kind of thing?
We, the Brampton Action Group, have offered any developer our help and assistance and advice free of charge. We're willing to sit down and go over the plans, talk with them, take them to places where similar installations exist, show them why they aren't accessible. It might be a good idea for other groups to get together and approach their city council and get the right to do this.
A resolution in council says the Brampton Action Group has the right to sit down with planning people and look at plans. Their recommendations are generally listened to. That's why Fitzpatrick was able to get a ramp built at the front of the new City Hall. And that's why he's pleased when he recalls the opening day ceremonies.
Probably the best day of my life. Watching a little lady, an elderly lady, go up the ramp, a kid with his bicycle, a mama with a stroller, and I'm sitting there saying, yeah, man, that's the way it's gotta be. That's what it's all about. That ramp has made City Hall people accessible.
People with disabilities have been hidden away by many societies, out of sight, out of mind. But recently, there have been changes in attitude worldwide. And Japan, which historically considered disabled people to be a source of shame, is one of the countries that is just starting to change. Our next story is about one person who is fighting to raise awareness. Wendy Hanamura reports from Fukushima.
Could you lend me a hand? That's the request Junko Asaka must make almost every day as she faces the greatest physical obstacle to her independence: stairs. For Japan's disabled, there are also invisible barriers: discrimination in education, employment, and a tradition of keeping the disabled shut away.
We are very much invisible people. I'm trying to use mass transit as much as I can, so people can see me and look at me and people can understand me.
Junko was born with a bone condition called osteogenesis imperfecta. She says she suffered over 20 fractures, which put her in a home for handicapped children for 3 years. Denied entry to normal junior high school, Junko had to fight for an education with the non-disabled. In 1983, she won a scholarship to the Center for Independent Living in Berkeley, California, where for the first time, she says she felt truly free.
US changed my life very, very much. To be different. To be different is totally okay. To be different means totally to be yourself.
Today at 35, Junko Asaka is fighting for the right to be a full participant in Japanese society, a society that's still largely inaccessible. Of the 1,000 stations in Tokyo, 24 have elevators. But that hasn't stopped Junko from going to see her clients, part of her job as a peer counselor for the disabled. One client, Yoshie Suzuki, has lived in a nursing home for the disabled for 8 years. Her dream is to have her own apartment like Junko and eventually get married and have 3 children. Most of Japan's 4 million mentally and physically disabled live in government-funded facilities or are cared for at home. Sociologists say historically, the disabled were considered a source of shame in Japan, so they were kept out of sight, segregated in special schools and trades. Yoshie would like to leave the nursing home, but her family won't allow it. In counseling, Junko helps her tackle other obstacles. Yoshie can't find adequate attendant care, and for 10 months, real estate agents have refused even to show her apartments.
怖いけどもやってみたい。
Residents of the disabled home run this organic food store, a place where they can work in mainstream society.
830円です。
By law, in private companies with more than 63 employees, 1.6% of the workforce must be disabled. Last year, nearly half the companies surveyed fell short of the quota. The Labor Ministry's Yukiko Sakamoto vows she will finally crack down on chronic violators.
今年はその6月にそういうことを決めてからそれぞれ対象の企業は113社ありますけど、そこにすでに当たってですね、11月までにここまでの成果が上がらなければ、これはもうあなたのところは好評ですよということで今全部指導してますから、そういう意味では労働省今度本気で悪いところは公表すると。
In her tiny two-room apartment, Junko lives on her own, relying on city-funded home helpers who come twice a week to do heavy chores, and government aid of about $1,500 per month. The disabled complain these services aren't available nationwide, so very few can live independently.
Because it needs a lot of power, energy, believeness, relationship, attendance, money, so many things create thinking. So.
Creative thinking and a band of volunteers, including her boyfriend Tomo, have taken Junko to seminars around the world. But back in Japan, attitudes change slowly. Tomo has been seeing Junko for 4.5 years, but he has yet to tell his parents she's disabled.
My family lives in countryside, and I think my parents would have a little bit resistance to their son going out with handicapped people.
Junko makes her monthly trip home to see her sister and family. It's here in rural Fukushima that Junko fought her toughest battle, breaking free from her family's loving protection.
My disability is not a sorry for or a pity thing. I think my disability is like my black hair, like my big eye. It's a personal uniqueness.
In Japan, the disabled are cared for, but Junko says they want the education, facilities, and services to care for themselves, to no longer be invisible people, but full members of society.
People with disabilities are becoming more and more independent as they move out into the community. Sometimes they need a little help. It can be provided by people through attendant services, or it can come from another type of companion, specially trained assistance dogs. Service dogs have given disabled persons new independence and mobility. They not only provide assistance but companionship and help an individual attain a genuine sense of self-worth and pride.
Well, I'm a real dog lover.
Nancy Maxwell has had to rely on her wheelchair for mobility since an unsuccessful childhood scoliosis operation ultimately resulted in paraplegia. Now she has a little more freedom because of Luna. She is Nancy's special skills dog. Luna is a working partner and friend. Nancy Maxwell says Luna also carries with her a great responsibility.
I am more active. I get out a lot more with my daughter, take her to the park and that, whereas before it was, oh, do we have to go there? It's so far. Let's take the truck. That's a girl. Whoops. Go get it, Luna. Fetch it. Fetch it up. Fetch it up. She'll, you know, pick up everything and hand it to me, and it's quite a relief because Luna's always there. Good girl. Yes, we dropped one. Like bending down, sometimes she'll fall out of the chair and things like this, so it is a relief there. Come on, Luna, let's get lunch. Come on, let's get lunch. Come on, Luna, come. Or if I need to get something out of the fridge, she'll go over and tug on the rope on the door to open the fridge. And if I drop something, like if I take something out of the fridge and I drop it, she's right there to pick it up and hand it back to me. Or if I'm cooking, she'll pick up things that are dropped.
Any disabled individual with the desire to achieve independence is eligible to apply for a dog. I asked Nancy how she applied.
Actually, I met Jacqueline Harbour down at the Sportsman Show, and I had just asked her if she knew anyone who was training service dogs, and they just gave me some applications and just went from there.
This is the Special Skills Dog Training Centre in Oakville, Ontario, one of the schools in Canada where these dogs are trained. Jacqueline Harbour is the director. Now, when it comes to the dog being selected, how do you go about finding the right type of dog for those people?
If the application comes back and we accept it along with the character references, then I go out and make a personal interview with the person to find out a bit more about them, to meet them, find out about their lifestyle, their personality, how active they are, so that I can go out and find a dog to suit them. If they're in a manual wheelchair, they need a big dog that's able to pull them. If they're in an electric wheelchair, they don't need possibly such a strong dog, but probably just as much a tall dog. Or sometimes we even give smaller dogs out if it's basically retrieving objects that they might drop, going to get help, this sort of thing. So each person is, and dog is chosen and placed for the individual.
Nancy Maxwell.
They train the dog for the individual, so every dog is taught different commands. Like Luna is taught pull. Now someone who isn't in a wheelchair wouldn't use that command, and it might be taught a different command, like steady, for the dog to steady them when they're getting up on their crutches or something like this. So every dog is different. Take it to the bedroom, come on, go to the bedroom. Take it to the bedroom. Ah, that's a good girl. One dog might know 100 commands, whereas another dog might only need 10.
Not every dog has the potential to be a guide, hearing, or special assist dog, according to Jacqueline Harbour.
We're looking for a dog that can go out there and work probably for 5 to 8 years. Very outgoing, very friendly, very willing to please, of course with a lot of retrieve instinct in them.
Help! Help!
50% of the dogs we get in to train do work.
Help!
The training takes about 6 months from the time we get the dog until it's ready to be placed with the individual.
Help!
We go out and take the dog to their new home, introducing the new dog to his new owner, teaching the new owner how to handle the dog, discipline the dog, so that it can get it to do the work that we've trained it to do, such as pull the wheelchair, retrieve objects, go for help.
Nancy says more public awareness is required so that members of the able-bodied population know that dogs such as Luna are working dogs and not pets.
The harness signifies that she's a special skills dog, and blue is their color. The tag that she's wearing is her certification, and it has a photograph of me and her on it. It says that she has been specially trained and she has privileges to go into anywhere with me, such as restaurants and things like this. And if I have any trouble with anyone there, I just have to show them this tag, and then if there's any more trouble, then we have to go to the human rights.
There is an ever-growing demand for these dog guides, a term which includes seeing eye, hearing ear, and special needs dogs. But costs are high, and there are a limited number of properly trained animals. Jacqueline Harbour.
Yes. We've never really advertised this yet. We still have a waiting list of about 15 to 20 people. We're pretty careful about the dogs we pick for the individuals. So that's sometimes why the waiting period is up to 2 years, because we're looking for that specific dog for that special person.
Luna, gotcha.
Together as a team, Nancy and Luna have become far more powerful than when alone. Most of us take payphones for granted, but a large segment of the population, people who are deaf, don't have access to regular phone booths. They can contact each other at home by typing out messages on keyboards attached to TTYs or TDDs. Henry Whalen, the host of Newsworld's program Silent News, and interpreter Michael Vorontsov showed me how the same type of system can be used with payphones. They took me to George Brown College in Toronto, where one of these devices is currently in use.
You imagine Toronto being a large city and you've got 2.5 million people. We only have 2 of these in the city of Toronto. And we have about 22,000 deaf people who would access this phone. So one is here at George Brown College and one is at the Sky Dome. So we only have 2 and they're not terribly accessible, obviously.
Why aren't there more of these phones installed in Toronto?
Well, Bell Canada looks upon this as a pilot program, and they're evaluating the process. And Bell says it doesn't make a lot of money with this kind of telephone, so they obviously are not thinking about accessibility or any of those kinds of issues.
Can people with hearing use this phone?
You see, it's a regular receiver, just like the other telephones. It's got the amplified sound for hard of hearing users, so anybody can use this telephone. When deaf people use this telephone, they hang it on the second handset and type away on the TTY, because the only function that they need is the actual TTY itself.
Can you demonstrate how this phone works for me?
How does the phone work? It's just like a regular phone. I got to put a quarter in, right? So they pick up the phone. Hearing people pick up the phone, I don't do that. What I do is I put it on the second hand rest, if you will. I deposit my quarter, and then I dial in my number. Now, we hope that whoever is on the other line will answer, and we see the light flashing. This tells us that the number is now being dialed, the frequency of the flash. And now, again, to the frequency of the flash, it tells us that the phone is ringing. So it's a delay, the red light comes on, and then they've answered, so now the phone's out and there is a readout on the screen. Hello, this is Michelle here, go ahead. And now I type my message. When, in effect, this phone hears the other TTY, it hears the signal, then that activates the drawer. The drawer then comes out because it's heard the signal, in effect, all right? And then I see their message on the screen, so then I respond to their message, and then I go ahead with my conversation. And now it's just like a regular conversation. Hearing person talks, and I'm talking as well, so it's a regular conversation. So now, see, and it closes, you see. Not when we expected, but it does close. You see, there was no use. What was happening is that we were having a conversation. There was no use on the TTY. So as an act in terms of, so that there is no damage, what happens is it protects itself and then it closes. We need a lot of support from our member organizations and the community in general to push for these services.
And that's our show. I'm Joe Coughlin.
And I'm Susan Pettit. See you again next week.
Our address is Disability Network, CBC, Box 500, Station 8, Toronto, M5W1E6. That's Disability Network, CBC, Box 500, Station 8, Toronto, M5W1E6. Or you can fax us at area code 416-975-5636.